You people think a nice suit makes you somebody. Officer Stephen Adamson didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed Teddy Fleming by the collar and drove him face first onto the hood of his own car. Teddy's cheek pressed flat against the hood, with his arms wrenched behind his back. Then the passenger door of Teddy's car opened. Chelsea Fleming stepped out and walked around the front of the vehicle without a single word. She reached into her blazer. She flipped open a leather credential case and held it up right where Stephen Adamson could not possibly miss it. A gold badge caught the evening light. FBI, Civil Rights Division. Adamson's grip loosened. His eyes went to the badge, then to her face, then back to the badge. What happened next, Stephen Adamson would spend the rest of his life trying to forget. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The street was quiet, the way Sunday evenings always were in Sycamore Heights. Porch lights were coming on one by one. Kids were being called inside. The smell of somebody's pot roast drifted out through a screen door. Teddy Fleming drove slowly down Sycamore Avenue with both hands on the wheel, the way he always did. Not because he had to, but because he had learned a long time ago that careful men lived longer. He was 38 years old. He had a medical degree on his office wall and 11 years of early mornings and late surgeries behind him. He drove a black luxury sedan he had bought himself, cash, after his first year as a full-attending cardiologist. He was wearing his good church jacket, the navy one with the gold buttons that Chelsea said made him look distinguished. Distinguished. That was the word she used. He glanced over at her now. Chelsea sat in the passenger seat with her legs crossed and her hands folded in her lap, her cream pinstripe suit still crisp after a full Sunday at his mother's house. She was looking out the window at the neighborhood she had known for 10 years of marriage. The old oak trees, the painted porches, the Baptist church on the corner with the missing letter on its marquee sign. "Your mama looked good today," Chelsea said. "She did," Teddy agreed. "Better than last month." He turned onto the main stretch of Sycamore Avenue and eased into the right lane. The sedan rolled smooth and easy. The engine barely made a sound. That was when the blue lights came on behind him. Teddy felt it in his chest first. Not panic. Something older and quieter than panic. A cold kind of knowing. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw the patrol cruiser sitting close. Too close. Its lights spinning red and blue against the darkening sky. Chelsea went still beside him. Neither of them spoke. He pulled over to the curb the way his father had taught him when he was 16 years old. Slow, smooth, hands where they can see them. He put the car in park. He turned the engine off. He pressed the button to roll down his window and then placed both hands on top of the steering wheel, fingers open, palms flat. The officer took his time getting out of the cruiser. When he finally appeared in the side mirror, Teddy watched him approach. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the slow swagger of a man who had never once been told no. He stopped at Teddy's window and looked into the car the way you look at something you're deciding what to do with. License and registration. Not good evening. Not, do you know why I stopped you? Just the words, flat and cold, like Teddy owed him something already. Teddy kept his hands visible as he reached slowly for the glove box. "Of course, officer," he said. His voice was steady. He had practiced steady his entire life. "May I ask what the stop is for?" The officer, his badge read Adamson, tilted his head just slightly. His jaw tightened. "You drifted across the lane marker back there." Teddy handed over his license and registration. "I don't believe I did, sir," he said. Calm, quiet, respectful. "I've been driving this street for years. I know this road well." Something shifted in Adamson's face. It was subtle, just a flicker behind the eyes. But Teddy had spent 11 years reading people's faces across operating tables and hospital beds, and he recognized the look instantly. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something that came before anger. It was a man deciding that he did not like being answered. Adamson looked down at the license, then back up at Teddy. His eyes moved slowly around the interior of the car. The leather seats, the clean dash, the suit jacket, the woman in the passenger seat in her expensive cream blazer. His lip moved, just barely, like he was working something over in his mind. "Sir," he said finally, his voice dropping half a register, "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." Teddy did not move right away, not out of defiance. Out of a 10-year-old reflex that told him, "Be careful, think. Do not give him a reason." "Officer," he said carefully, "can you tell me why I need to—" "Out of the vehicle." Adamson's voice had no give in it at all. "Now." Chelsea's hand found the door handle. Teddy touched her arm once. "Wait." And then he opened his door. He stepped out onto the sidewalk slowly, both hands raised to shoulder height, fingers spread wide. The porch light above Reverend Mosby's house clicked on across the street. The evening had just turned into something else entirely. Teddy stood on the sidewalk with his hands at shoulder height and waited. Officer Adamson came around the front of the sedan slowly, like he had all the time in the world. His partner, younger, with a patchy beard and nervous eyes, his nameplate reading Bailey, hung back near the rear bumper. Teddy had already clocked him. The younger one wasn't sure about this. That much was obvious. But unsure didn't mean helpful. And Teddy knew that too. "You got anything in the car I should know about?" Adamson asked. "No, sir." "Weapons? Drugs?" "No, sir." Adamson walked a slow half-circle around Teddy, looking him up and down the way a man looks at something he's already decided about. Teddy kept his hands up. He kept his face neutral. He had learned this particular kind of stillness the way most black men his age had learned it, not in a classroom, but in the body, in the blood. Stay calm. Stay small. Get home. "Officer," Teddy said, keeping his voice even, "I've complied fully. I'd like to understand what probable cause. What did you just say to me?" Teddy stopped. Adamson had gone very still. His head tilted forward just slightly, chin down, like a man who had just heard something that offended him deeply. His right hand dropped to his belt. "I asked what I was stopped for, officer," Teddy said carefully. "That's all." "You're stopped," Adamson said, taking one step closer. "Because I said so. That's all you need to know." From across the street, on the porch steps of a yellow house with white trim, a 17-year-old boy named Darius shifted where he was sitting. He had been watching since the cruiser lights came on. Now his hand moved slowly to his phone, quietly, carefully. He set it upright against the porch railing, angled toward the street, and pressed record. None of the three men by the sedan noticed. "Turn around," Adamson said. "Hands on the hood." Teddy turned. He placed both palms flat on the warm metal of his own car. He stared at the reflection in the hood, his own face looking back at him, stretched and darkened in the black paint. "Stay calm. Get home." "You people," Adamson muttered, low and sharp, moving in close behind him, "come into this neighborhood with your fancy cars and your fancy clothes and think that means something." Teddy felt his jaw lock. He said nothing. "Thinking you're better than everybody else. Thinking the rules don't apply." "I haven't broken any rules," Teddy said quietly. That was all it took. Adamson grabbed him by the collar of his church jacket, the navy one, the one with the gold buttons, and slammed him forward onto the hood of the car. The sound was enormous. It cracked through the quiet evening like something breaking that couldn't be fixed. Teddy's chest hit the metal hard. His cheek struck the hood a half-second later. The impact rattled up through his teeth, his jaw, the back of his skull. For one long second, the world was nothing but the smell of hot metal and the hard surface pressing into his face. Adamson wrenched Teddy's arms up behind his back. "Non-compliant," he announced loudly, like he was reading from a script. Subject was non-compliant. On Reverend Mosby's porch, Darius stopped breathing. His phone was still recording. A woman on the neighboring porch stood up from her chair. An old man walking his dog across the street stopped dead on the sidewalk. Somebody's screen door banged open. The neighborhood, which had been warm and ordinary 30 seconds ago, had gone cold and electric. Inside the sedan, Chelsea Fleming did not make a sound. She sat absolutely still in the passenger seat, watching her husband pinned against the hood of their car. Her eyes moved from Teddy's face, cheek pressed to metal, eyes open and controlled, to Adamson's hand gripping the back of his jacket, to Bailey, who stood at the rear bumper with his hand half raised and his mouth slightly open. Bailey hesitated. 1 full second. 2. Then he reached for his cuffs. "Don't," a voice said inside Chelsea. "Not out loud. Not yet. Not like this." Her hand moved slowly to her blazer, to the inner pocket. Her fingers found the edge of the leather case she had carried for 12 years. On the hood of the car, Teddy stared at his own reflection and breathed. One breath, then another. Stay calm. But calm was the one thing left on Sycamore Avenue that nobody could guarantee anymore. The passenger door opened. It didn't swing wide or bang against its hinges. It opened the way Chelsea Fleming did everything. Controlled, deliberate, with exactly the amount of force required and not 1 ounce more. She stepped out onto the sidewalk and smoothed the front of her cream pinstripe suit with one hand. Then she walked around the front of the sedan. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She walked. Adamson heard her footsteps and looked up. He still had Teddy pinned at the wrist, bent forward over the hood. His expression said he was already composing a reason to tell her to get back in the car. He never got the chance. Chelsea reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. Her fingers closed around the leather credential case she had carried for 12 years. Through field operations in 4 states, through courtrooms and depositions, through moments far more dangerous than this quiet street. She pulled it out. She flipped it open with one clean motion and held it up where Adamson could not possibly miss it. The gold badge caught the last of the evening light. "Special Agent Chelsea Fleming," she said. Her voice was calm and clear and carried the full length of the block. "FBI, Civil Rights Division." She took one step closer. "Officer, you will release my husband. Right now." The street went absolutely silent. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. Adamson stared at the badge. His grip on Teddy's wrist loosened by degrees, not all at once, not willingly, but like a man whose hands were getting a message his brain hadn't fully approved yet. His eyes moved from the badge to Chelsea's face, and back to the badge again. Across the street, Darius's phone kept recording. On the neighboring porch, the woman who had stood up from her chair brought both hands to her mouth. Bailey took a full step backward. 3 seconds passed. Maybe 4. They felt much longer. Then Adamson released Teddy's wrists and straightened up. Teddy pushed himself off the hood slowly. He stood upright and turned around, rolling his shoulders back with careful dignity. His jacket was torn at the seam where Adamson had grabbed him. There was a cut above his left cheekbone, a thin dark line where the edge of the hood had caught him, already beating. He did not reach up to touch it. He just stood there, breathing, and looked at his wife. Chelsea did not look back at him yet. Her eyes stayed fixed on Adamson. Bailey exhaled audibly. A neighbor somewhere down the block said something low and sharp to the person standing next to them. The tension in the air didn't disappear. It just shifted, redistributed itself, settled into something new and watchful. Then Adamson squared his shoulders. He looked at Chelsea's badge one more time. He looked at her face. And then something moved behind his eyes that was worse than confusion, worse than embarrassment. It was calculation. It was a man deciding in real time that he was not going to give an inch. "Badge or not, ma'am," he said, his voice flat and deliberate. "Your husband was non-compliant. I was within my rights." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Chelsea did not blink. "You slammed a man onto the hood of a car for asking a question," she said. "That is not within your rights. That is a federal civil rights violation, and you know it." Adamson smiled. It was a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes at all. "You have a good evening now," he said. Then he turned to Bailey, gave one short nod toward the cruiser, and walked away. Just like that. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement that anything unusual had happened at all. Chelsea watched him go. She kept her credentials raised until the cruiser doors closed. She kept her face completely still until the taillights disappeared around the corner at the end of the block. Then she turned to Teddy. He was standing beside the car with his hand raised to his cheek now, pressing lightly against the cut. His jacket hung wrong at the shoulder. His eyes were steady, but tired in a way that went deeper than the hour. She stepped forward and took his face gently in both hands, tilting it toward the light to look at the cut. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Behind them, Reverend Mosby's porch light was on. The old woman was already rising from her chair. And across the street, Darius quietly lowered his phone from the railing and checked that the video had saved. Adamson's cruiser was gone, but the street hadn't relaxed. People stood on their porches the way people do after something bad happens in a neighborhood, not sure whether to go inside or stay put, not sure whether the danger had passed or just moved somewhere they couldn't see yet. The old man with the dog stood frozen on the sidewalk across the street. Two women leaned together at the fence line of the next yard over, speaking low and fast. Reverend Arlene Mosby came down her porch steps, one at a time, holding the railing, moving with the careful steadiness of a woman who had seen 71 years of this world and was not about to hurry for anyone. She crossed the street and came straight to Teddy. "Baby," she said, reaching up to take his face in her hands the same way his own grandmother used to. She examined the cut on his cheekbone with sharp, knowing eyes. "You need stitches?" "No, ma'am," Teddy said. "It's shallow." "You sure?" "I'm a cardiologist, Reverend Mosby." She gave him a long look. Then she patted his cheek gently, just once, on the uninjured side. "Your mama is going to lose her mind when she sees this." "I know," he said quietly. Chelsea was standing a few feet away with her phone already at her ear. The neighbors were gathering. 8 people, then 10, then 12, drifting in from porches and driveways, the way people do when something pulls them. Nobody seemed to want to be the first to leave. "Ricky," Chelsea said into the phone, her voice low and controlled. It happened about 20 minutes ago. Sycamore Avenue, Beaumont, Stephen Adamson, Beaumont County Sheriff's Department. She paused, listening. "Teddy is okay. The cut needs to be cleaned." "No, I'm not. Ricky, listen to me. We need to move carefully on this. Do not do anything until I call you back." She lowered the phone and turned back toward the car. That was when Darius stepped forward. He was 17, tall and thin, with his grandmother's serious eyes and a faded Grizzlies hoodie pushed up to the elbows. He came down off Reverend Mosby's porch steps and crossed the street with his phone held out in front of him like an offering. "Miss Chelsea," he said. He had known her since he was 9 years old. "I got the whole thing." Chelsea looked at the phone screen. Darius pressed play. The footage was steady and clear. The railing had held the phone perfectly still. The angle caught everything. Adamson approaching the driver's window, Teddy stepping out with his hands raised, the half-circle walk, the moment Adamson grabbed the collar of the jacket. The slam, the sound of it. Then Chelsea getting out of the car, the badge, Adamson's face when he saw it, and his voice, clean and audible in the quiet evening air. "Badge or not, ma'am, your husband was non-compliant. I was within my rights." Chelsea watched the whole thing without speaking. Then she watched it again. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes went very still and very focused, the way a surgeon's hands go still right before the most important cut. "Darius," she said, "I need you to send this to my number right now, and I need you not to post it anywhere. Not tonight. Can you do that for me?" Darius nodded immediately. "Yes, ma'am." "Not anywhere. Not your friends, not your story, not anywhere." "I got you," he said, already pulling up her contact. The file transferred in seconds. Chelsea forwarded it directly to Ricky without a word of explanation. Ricky had been her partner for 6 years. He would know exactly what he was looking at. The neighbors began to drift closer. Reverend Mosby was speaking to 2 of them in a low voice, her hand resting on one woman's arm. Somebody had brought a first aid kit from inside their house and was handing it to Reverend Mosby without being asked. Teddy's mother appeared in the doorway of her house. She looked at her son's face from across the yard, at the cut, the torn jacket, the way he was holding himself, and her hand went to her chest. She didn't say a word. She just pushed the screen door open wider and waited. Inside, at the kitchen table, Teddy sat still while his mother pressed a clean cloth dampened with antiseptic to his cheekbone. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't crying, but the shaking was worse. Chelsea stood in the doorway, watching the 2 of them. Her phone was in her hand. Ricky was already calling back. "Ricky," she said quietly, stepping into the hallway. "We need to move carefully." She looked back at Teddy, at his steady eyes, his torn jacket, his mother's trembling hands. "But we will move." Chelsea didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table in Teddy's mother's house with her laptop open and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The house was quiet around her. Teddy had finally fallen asleep past midnight, after the 2 of them had sat together on the edge of the bed, not saying much, just sitting, the way you do when words aren't quite big enough for what happened. His mother had gone to bed even later, after checking on Teddy twice. Now it was 6:30 a.m., and the kitchen was still dark except for the laptop screen. Chelsea had spent the night organizing. The video. Reverend Mosby's preliminary account. The name Stephen Adamson cross-referenced against the Beaumont County Sheriff's Department roster. She had a legal pad beside the laptop, with notes written in her small, precise handwriting. She was building something careful and solid, the way she always did, brick by brick. Then her phone rang. "Ricky." She picked up on the first ring. "It's out," he said. No greeting. No preamble. "The video is out, Chelsea. A Memphis station has it. They're running it in the 6 o'clock block right now." She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she opened them. "How?" "Darius sent it to 3 friends last night. It was 12 people by 4 in the morning. A station tipster had it by 5. She stood up from the table and walked to the doorway of the living room. The television was off. The house was still quiet. She thought about waking Teddy, then decided he needed 2 more minutes of a world where this hadn't happened yet. "The footage is clean," Ricky said. "Uncut, unedited. There's nothing they can do about the content, Chelsea. It says what it says." "I know," she said. "I know." She went to the living room and turned the television on low. She found the Memphis station in 30 seconds. The anchor was mid-sentence, the footage already rolling on the screen behind her. Sycamore Avenue, the black sedan, the blue lights. Teddy stepping out with his hands raised. Adamson's half-circle walk. The slam. Chelsea stood in the middle of her mother-in-law's living room and watched her husband get thrown onto the hood of his own car on live television. She heard movement behind her. Teddy appeared in the hallway doorway in a plain white t-shirt, his church jacket gone, the cut on his cheekbone dark against his skin in the morning light. He looked at the screen. He went very still. Then his mother appeared behind him, tying her robe at the waist, and stopped when she saw what was on the television. Nobody spoke for a long moment. They watched Chelsea walk around the front of the car on the screen. They watched the badge go up. They heard Adamson's voice, clear and sharp through the television speakers. "Badge or not, ma'am, your husband was non-compliant. I was within my rights." Teddy's mother sat down slowly in her armchair. She gripped both armrests with both hands and stared at the screen and said nothing at all, which was somehow the most devastating response of all three of them. Teddy sat beside her on the arm of the chair and put his hand over hers. By 7:80 a.m. the clip had been picked up by 2 national outlets. By 8:20 a.m. it was everywhere. The phones started. Chelsea's work cell, her personal cell, Teddy's cell. Numbers they recognized, numbers they didn't. A civil rights attorney out of Atlanta, a journalist from a national paper, 3 people from their church back in Memphis. Chelsea let most of them go to voicemail. For one brief, fragile moment, standing in that living room watching the country react, it felt like the truth was so visible and so plain that the system would simply have to respond. The video existed. The whole country could see it. What else was there to argue? She allowed herself one careful exhale. Then she went back to the kitchen table, put on a fresh pot of coffee, and changed into her most formal suit. She smoothed the jacket, checked her credentials in her bag, and walked to the hallway where Teddy was still sitting with his mother. "I'm going to the sheriff's department," she said. "I'm filing a formal complaint and opening a preliminary inquiry." Teddy looked up at her. His mother looked up at her. "I'll be back by noon," Chelsea said. She kissed Teddy's forehead. She picked up her bag. She walked out the front door into the sharp Monday morning light and pulled it closed quietly behind her. The Beaumont County Sheriff's Department sat on a wide corner lot downtown, all beige brick and tinted glass, American flags snapping in the morning wind out front. Chelsea pulled into the visitor parking lot at exactly 8:01 a.m., turned off the engine, and sat for a moment. She had walked into police departments before. Dozens of them, across 7 states, in 12 years with the Civil Rights Division. She knew how these buildings worked. She knew how the people inside them thought. She knew the particular kind of silence that fell over a front desk when a federal agent walked through the door. She got out of the car and went inside. The lobby was fluorescent lit and smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. A young officer at the front desk looked up when she entered. Chelsea placed her credentials on the counter without being asked. "Special Agent Chelsea Fleming, FBI. I'm here to file a formal complaint regarding an incident involving Officer Stephen Adamson last evening and to notify the department of my intent to open a preliminary inquiry. I'd like to speak with whoever is in charge." The officer looked at her credentials, then at her face, then back at the credentials. He picked up his phone and made a call. Chelsea waited. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her and her bag over one shoulder, and she looked straight ahead at the wall behind the desk, where a row of framed departmental photos hung in matching black frames. Stephen Adamson's face was in the third one from the left. He was smiling. 3 minutes later, footsteps came down the hallway. Deputy Chief Belinda Cameron was 52 years old and looked like someone had built her specifically for this kind of moment. She was polished in a way that took real effort. Pressed uniform, silver hair cut close and neat, posture so correct it looked permanent. She extended her hand as she approached and shook Chelsea's firmly, the way people do when they want to control the temperature of a room before anyone else gets the chance. "Agent Fleming," she said. "Belinda Cameron. Why don't we step into my office?" It wasn't a question. Cameron's office was tidy in a way that felt deliberate. Nothing personal on the desk. Awards on the wall arranged by size. She sat down, folded her hands on the desk surface, and looked at Chelsea with an expression of practiced professional sympathy. "I've seen the video," she said, before Chelsea could open her mouth. "Then you know why I'm here." "I do." Cameron nodded slowly. "And I want to assure you that this department takes all use of force concerns seriously." She paused, just long enough to signal that the next part had been prepared. Officer Adamson responded appropriately to a non-compliant subject. The presence of an FBI credential does not retroactively alter an officer's threat assessment at the time of a stop. We will be conducting a full internal review, and I can assure you that review will be thorough and fair. Chelsea looked at her steadily. "Your officer slammed my husband, a physician with no criminal record, who had both hands visible and had complied with every instruction, across the hood of his car for asking a question. Then he dismissed a federal agent's directive on a public street. That is not a use of force concern. That is a federal civil rights violation." Cameron's expression didn't flicker. "I understand you're upset, Agent Fleming. That's completely understandable given your personal connection to the subject of the stop." She tilted her head slightly. "Which does raise a question worth considering." Chelsea waited. "Your relationship to Dr. Fleming creates a significant conflict of interest." Cameron's voice stayed warm and even, like she was discussing the weather. "Using your federal position to intervene in a matter involving your own family, and then opening a federal inquiry into the department that handled that matter. That's the kind of thing that raises serious questions about professional conduct. I'd imagine your bureau would be quite concerned about an agent using her credentials for what could be characterized as a personal grievance." The room was very quiet. It was a beautiful threat. Clean and professional and completely deniable. No raised voices, no fingerprints, just a door swinging shut on well-oiled hinges. Chelsea held Cameron's gaze for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and placed her copy of the formal complaint on the desk between them. "You'll find everything in order," she said. She stood, straightened her jacket, and picked up her bag. "Have a good morning, Deputy Chief." She walked out of the office, down the hallway, through the lobby, and out into the morning air. She crossed the parking lot. She got into her car. She sat behind the wheel and stared through the windshield at the beige brick building for 30 full seconds. Then she picked up her phone. "Ricky," she said, "they're going to try to make this about me. They're going to make the badge the problem." Chelsea got back to the house a little past noon. Teddy was sitting on the front porch with a glass of water he hadn't touched, staring out at Sycamore Avenue. He looked up when she pulled in. She could tell from his face that he had spent the morning doing what she had been afraid he would do. Thinking. Sitting with it. Turning it over and over the way you do when something won't leave you alone. She sat down in the chair beside him and told him everything. Cameron's prepared statement. The practiced warmth. The threat dressed up in professional language. She didn't soften any of it. Teddy listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked back out at the street. "So she's going to say you made it personal," he said. "She already has." He was quiet for a moment. "Can she make that stick?" "She can try," Chelsea said. "Which means we need more than the video. We need a pattern." Teddy nodded slowly, like something had settled in him. Not acceptance. Something harder than that. Resolve. Ricky arrived from Memphis at 4 in the afternoon in his dark blue sedan, a garment bag over one arm and his laptop bag over the other. He was 41 years old, broad-shouldered, and almost entirely unreadable, which was one of the qualities that made him an exceptional federal agent. He shook Teddy's hand at the door with a firm, steady grip and didn't say anything dramatic. Just, "Dr. Fleming, I'm glad you're standing." Teddy nodded. "So am I." They sat up at the kitchen table. Ricky's laptop, Chelsea's legal pad, 2 fresh cups of coffee. Teddy's mother moved quietly around the kitchen edges, refilling things without being asked, the way mothers do when they need to feel useful and don't know what else to offer. Reverend Mosby arrived at 6 o'clock exactly. She knocked twice and came in without waiting for an answer, the way she had been doing in this neighborhood for 40 years. She was carrying a cardboard box with both arms, holding it against her chest like it was something precious. She set it on the kitchen table between the laptops and the coffee cups and straightened up. "I've been waiting," she said simply, "for someone worth giving this to." Chelsea looked at the box. Then at Reverend Mosby. "How long have you had this?" 23 years of collecting." She pulled out the chair across from Chelsea and sat down. "And I had it all notarized in 2019 because I have always known, that one day I would need somebody to take it seriously." They opened the box. Inside were folders, each one labeled by year in Reverend Mosby's careful handwriting. Incident reports, personal testimonies written on lined paper, signed and dated, photographs, handwritten complaint records that had clearly never made it into any official system, copies of letters sent to the department that had never received a response. Chelsea and Ricky worked through them methodically, side by side for nearly 2 hours. Teddy sat across the table and read file after file in silence, his face tightening by degrees with each one, the way a fist tightens slowly around something it cannot let go of. Officer Stephen Adamson's name appeared 11 times. 11 separate incidents over 6 years. A stop and search on a man walking home from work at 9 in the evening. No cause, no arrest, nothing. A 67-year-old man named Justin Edwards, walking his dog on a Tuesday morning, who ended up in the emergency room with a broken wrist. 3 different residents on the same block, who had been pulled over in front of their own homes within a 4-month stretch. Every single complaint filed against Adamson had been dismissed or quietly buried at the departmental level. Every single one bore Belinda Cameron's signature on the closure document. Chelsea set the last folder down and looked up. The kitchen was very quiet. The overhead light hummed. Outside the window, Sycamore Avenue had gone dark and still. Ricky was already pulling up Beaumont County's public property records on his laptop screen, his jaw set, his fingers moving fast. "This isn't one bad officer," Chelsea said. She looked at Ricky, then at Reverend Mosby. "This is a managed program." Reverend Mosby didn't look surprised. She looked like a woman who had known the answer to a question for 23 years and had finally been asked it. Ricky turned his laptop screen so Chelsea could see it. A county map filled the screen, parcels outlined in blue, rezoning proposals marked in red. "Look where the red is," he said quietly. Chelsea looked. Then she pulled her legal pad closer and uncapped her pen. Teddy's mother made breakfast at 7 and left it on the stove without waking anyone. By the time Chelsea came downstairs at 8, the eggs were cold, and the kitchen smelled like coffee and concentration. Ricky was already at the table, laptop open, 2 empty cups pushed to one side and a third halfway gone. He had clearly been at it for hours. His jacket was draped over the back of his chair, and his sleeves were rolled to the elbows. He had the look of a man who had found something and was still figuring out exactly how large it was. Teddy had gone to take his mother to a doctor's appointment. A routine checkup scheduled weeks ago that his mother had refused to cancel. He needed the ordinary routine of it. Chelsea had encouraged him to go. She needed the quiet, too. She poured herself a coffee and sat down across from Ricky. "Show me," she said. He turned the laptop to face her. The screen showed a Beaumont County map layered with two sets of data. The first was a plot of every use-of-force incident recorded by the Sheriff's Department over the past 5 years, each one marked with a small red dot. The second layer was a commercial rezoning proposal that had been filed with the City Council 8 months ago, its target areas shaded in yellow. The red dots and the yellow shading sat almost perfectly on top of each other. 3 zip codes, all of them historically black neighborhoods, all of them in the path of the proposed development. Sycamore Heights was the largest of the 3, sitting right at the center of the map like a bullseye. Chelsea set her coffee cup down. Adamson's incidents alone, Ricky said, pulling up a second document, account for 34% of all physical force used in Sycamore Heights over 5 years. 34%. 1 officer, 1 neighborhood. He tapped the screen. That is not a coincidence, Chelsea. That is a deployment strategy. She studied the map carefully. Who filed the rezoning proposal? Ricky pulled up a third document. City Council meeting minutes from 8 months prior. It was co-sponsored by 3 council members: Harold Brixton, councilman for District 4, Vera Lyle, District 7, and Thomas Greer, District 9. He opened another tab. Now look at this. He brought up Beaumont County campaign finance records, public filings, all of it legally accessible to anyone who knew where to look. He highlighted 2 entries in Cameron's most recent campaign finance report. 2 donations, both from a real estate development LLC registered to a holding company. The holding company, when traced one step further through public business filings, connected directly to Thomas Greer. She's been taking money from one of the council members pushing the rezoning, Chelsea said, for 4 years. The kitchen was very quiet. Chelsea stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Sycamore Avenue was calm in the morning light. Kids on bikes, a woman hanging laundry on a line between 2 posts, an old man reading on his porch, people living their lives on a street that someone in a city council office had decided was worth more empty than full. She thought about Reverend Mosby's box. 23 years of complaints. 23 years of a neighborhood being told that what was happening to them wasn't really happening. And underneath all of it, a financial motive so straightforward, it was almost insulting. Scare people enough. Make the neighborhood feel unstable enough. Drive down property values enough. Then buy it cheap and build something profitable. Stephen Adamson wasn't just a bad officer, he was a tool. And Belinda Cameron wasn't just covering for him, she was operating him. Chelsea came back to the table and sat down. She pulled her legal pad over and began writing in her small, precise hand. Names, dates, amounts, connections. The kind of notes that became the spine of a federal case. "We need someone who can litigate this," she said. "Not just the civil rights violation, all of it. The pattern, the financial connections, the coordinated displacement." Ricky reached into his laptop bag and slid a business card across the table. She called the office yesterday after the video went up. Said she'd been watching Beaumont County for 2 years and was waiting for the right case. Chelsea picked up the card. Jemima Clark, Civil Rights Litigation. Clark and Associates. She had heard the name. Everyone in the Civil Rights Division had heard the name. 11 cases against police departments. 9 wins. The other 2 were still in court. Chelsea picked up her phone and dialed. Jemima Clark answered on the second ring. "Ms. Clark," Chelsea said. "My name is Special Agent Chelsea Fleming. I believe we have something worth your time." She paused. "Actually, I think we have something worth everyone's time." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then, "Send me everything." "All of it?" Chelsea asked. "Every single page." By Wednesday, the cut above Teddy's cheekbone had faded to a thin, dark line. He could almost forget it was there. Almost. Then he would catch his reflection in the bathroom mirror. or feel the faint pull of it when he smiled, and the whole Sunday evening would come back to him in one cold rush. The hood of the car, the smell of hot metal, the sound his own chest made when it hit. He had been careful since Monday, careful the way Chelsea had asked him to be. No statements, no interviews, no public comments. Let the legal process move. Let the video speak. Trust the system. He had been trusting the system his entire life. On Wednesday afternoon, while Chelsea and Ricky were deep in documents at the kitchen table and his mother was resting, Teddy sat on the back porch alone with his phone. A producer from a Memphis television station had been calling since Monday. The messages were respectful and persistent. "Dr. Fleming, we'd love to give you the opportunity to tell your story in your own words." His own words. He thought about that for a long time. He thought about 38 years of choosing his words so carefully that sometimes he barely said anything at all. He thought about his church jacket with the torn shoulder seam. He thought about Reverend Mosby's box and the name Justin Edwards, a 67-year-old man with a broken wrist who had been walking his dog, and how nobody had put a camera in front of Justin Edwards and asked him to speak. Teddy called the producer back. He didn't tell Chelsea not to deceive her. He knew exactly what she would say. Wait, be patient. Let the legal process lead. And he knew she would be professionally right. But there are moments when being professionally right isn't the only thing that matters. There are moments when a man has to speak because staying quiet has its own cost. And Teddy had been paying that cost for a very long time. The interview aired Wednesday evening. The producer had sent a small crew to the house. 2 cameras, a sound technician, a woman named Belinda who handled the lighting. They set up in the living room. Teddy sat in the armchair by the window in his repaired church jacket, the navy one with the gold buttons, the shoulder seam stitched back together so neatly you could barely see where it had torn. He spoke quietly and without drama, the way he always had. He had been a cardiologist for 11 years. He had performed hundreds of surgeries. He had delivered hard news to families in hospital corridors more times than he could count. And he had learned that the truth lands harder when you don't dress it up. "I was driving home from Sunday dinner at my mother's house," he said to the camera. "Both hands on the wheel, under the speed limit. I did everything right. I have always done everything right." He paused. "I would like my fellow Americans to understand something very simple. I was not doing anything wrong. I was driving. That is all I was doing." The bruise under his eye had faded, but the camera caught the remnant of it, the shadow of yellow-green at the edge of his cheekbone, and it said more than any words could have. He didn't perform outrage. He didn't raise his voice. He just described what happened, factually and precisely, the way a doctor documents a case. And somehow that quiet precision was more devastating than any amount of anger would have been. The interview went nationally viral before midnight. Chelsea watched it from the kitchen table on her laptop, her coffee going cold beside her. She watched the whole thing without speaking. When it ended, she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. She wasn't angry. She understood. She even, in the private space of her own chest, felt something loosen when she heard his voice on the screen, steady and clear and utterly unbroken. By Thursday morning, the hashtag #DrivingWhileFleming was trending nationally. Civil rights organizations issued statements. News networks ran the interview clip in heavy rotation. A U.S. Senator's office called Chelsea's cell phone directly and left a message expressing concern and requesting a conversation. And the Beaumont County Sheriff's Department, under the sudden crushing weight of national attention, released a brief statement announcing that Officer Stephen Adamson had been placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome of the internal review. Chelsea read the statement twice. Then she looked across the table at Ricky. Paid leave, she said. It's something, Ricky said carefully. It's the beginning of something, she corrected. She took Teddy's hand when he came back inside from the porch, where he had been reading the news on his phone. He looked at her steadily, waiting to see what she thought. You did good, she said quietly. Don't do it again without telling me first. He almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. The call came Friday morning at 7:42 a.m. Chelsea was already dressed when her work phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her SAC, Special Agent in Charge Erwin Danson, Memphis Field Office, a man she had worked under for 6 years and trusted completely, was calling 40 minutes before business hours. That alone told her everything she needed to know about the nature of the call. She stepped into the hallway and answered. Chelsea. His voice had that careful, measured quality that senior agents develop over decades. The voice that gives nothing away before it has to. I need you to come in this morning. My office, 9 o'clock. What happened? A pause, just short enough to confirm her worst suspicion. We'll talk when you get here. She told Teddy she had a meeting at the field office and would be back by noon. He was at the kitchen table with his mother, both of them looking up when she came downstairs with her bag. She kept her face neutral. She kissed his cheek, the uninjured one, and walked out to the car. The drive to Memphis took 40 minutes. She spent most of it thinking through every possible version of what was waiting for her in Danson's office, lining them up in order of likelihood the way she had been trained to do. By the time she pulled into the field office parking structure, she had already identified the most probable one. She sat in the car for 60 seconds. Then she went inside. Danson's office was on the 4th floor, corner window, overlooking the river. He was standing when she came in, which was unusual. He gestured to the chair across from his desk and closed the door behind her. He didn't sit down right away. He stood with his hands in his pockets and looked out the window for a moment, like he was buying himself one last second before the words became real. Belinda Cameron contacted the office, he said. Yesterday afternoon. She filed a formal letter questioning your professional objectivity and raising concerns about potential abuse of authority. He finally turned to face her. She's claiming you used your federal credentials to intimidate a local officer during a personal domestic matter. I identified myself to an officer who was violating my husband's civil rights, Chelsea said. Her voice was completely level. That is not intimidation. That is standard protocol. I know that. Danson sat down. He folded his hands on the desk. Chelsea, there's more. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk toward her. She looked at it without picking it up. It was a printout of a news article published that morning by a national outlet. The headline read, FBI agent at Center of Tennessee traffic stop has prior conduct review. Sources say. The article was careful in the way that truly dangerous articles are careful. It never stated anything false. It simply revealed the existence of a letter of counseling in Chelsea's personnel file from early in her career, when a confidential informant's identity had been briefly compromised during an undercover operation. The case had succeeded. No one had been hurt. The letter was routine, the kind of administrative documentation that got generated, filed, and forgotten in any long federal career. But the article didn't say any of that. It just said the letter existed. She leaked it, Chelsea said. We believe so. Yes. The case it came from was a success. I was never disciplined. That letter has had zero impact on my career record. I know. Danson leaned forward. Chelsea, I believe you. I want you to understand that clearly. But I am receiving pressure from above this office, and the Bureau is concerned about the optics of an active agent running a preliminary inquiry into a department that is simultaneously filing conduct complaints against her. He stopped, then said the words she had already heard coming from 2 blocks away. I'm placing the inquiry on hold, effective today, and I'm moving you to administrative desk duty until the conduct review is resolved." The office was very quiet. Chelsea looked at the article on the desk between them, then at Danson's face, genuinely pained, genuinely apologetic, and utterly immovable. She asked one question. "Did the case succeed?" He said, "Yes." "Then we're done here," she said. She stood, straightened her jacket, and picked up her bag. Danson said her name once more as she reached the door. She stopped, but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," he said. "I have to protect the institution." She walked out without answering. In the parking garage, she sat behind the wheel of her car in the gray concrete silence for 20 full minutes. She stared at nothing. She breathed. She let herself feel the full weight of it, the betrayal, the calculation, the elegant cruelty of having her own career used as a weapon against her. Then she picked up her phone and called Teddy. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, how'd it go?" She looked at the ceiling of the car. "They turned my badge against us," she said quietly. "So we're going to do this a different way." Chelsea got back to Sycamore Heights a little past 2 in the afternoon. She didn't say much on the drive. She had spent the 40 minutes from Memphis doing what she always did when something hit hard. Filing it away, sorting through it, deciding what was useful and what was just pain. By the time she turned onto Sycamore Avenue, the pain had been set aside, and what remained was something cleaner and much more dangerous. Determination. Teddy was on the front porch when she pulled in. He had been watching for her car. She could tell by the way he stood up before she had even fully stopped. She came up the porch steps, and he held the door open and didn't ask anything yet, which was one of the 1,000 small reasons she had married him. His mother had made dinner. Smothered chicken, rice, green beans from the garden she kept along the side of the house. They ate together at the kitchen table, the three of them, and talked about ordinary things, his mother's doctor visit, the neighbor's new fence, a church fundraiser that was coming up next month. Normal conversation, the kind that holds a family together when everything else is pulling at the seams. After dinner, Teddy's mother washed the dishes, kissed them both on the cheek, and went to bed at 9 o'clock with the quiet dignity of a woman who understood when she was needed and when she wasn't. The house settled around them. Chelsea and Teddy sat at the kitchen table with the overhead light on and 2 fresh cups of coffee between them. She laid it all out for him then, everything. The call from Danson, the article, the leaked letter, the desk duty. She used plain language, and she didn't soften a single word of it, because Teddy Fleming was not a man who needed things softened, and she respected him too much to try. He listened the way he always listened, completely still, both hands wrapped around his coffee cup, eyes on her face. He didn't interrupt. He didn't react until she was finished. When she stopped talking, the kitchen was very quiet. Teddy looked down at his coffee cup for a long moment. Outside, somewhere down the block, a dog was barking at something, and then stopped. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove read 9:47 p.m. Then Teddy picked up his phone. Chelsea watched him. "Who are you calling?" He didn't answer right away. He was scrolling through his contacts with one thumb, moving slowly, like he was looking for something he hadn't needed in a very long time. He found what he was looking for and stared at it for a moment. 8 years ago, he said. I was a second-year attending. We had a patient come in through the ER on a Tuesday night. No insurance, no next of kin listed, nobody there with him. Massive cardiac event. He was 41 years old. Teddy paused. I did the surgery. 4 hours. It went well. He looked up at Chelsea. His name is Jacob Coulson. He sends me a card every year on the anniversary of the surgery. Has done it every year for 8 years, without missing one. Chelsea was quiet, listening. He's the senior investigative reporter for a national newspaper now. Teddy set the phone down flat on the table between them. I have never once asked him for anything. Not one single thing in 8 years. He looked at her steadily, not asking for permission, just making sure she understood. I'm not asking for favorable coverage, he said. I'm asking him one question. Whether he knows anyone who has looked at Beaumont County's use of force numbers. Chelsea looked at her husband, at the cut still faintly visible on his cheekbone, at the steady set of his jaw, at the quiet fire in his eyes that had been building since Sunday evening and had nowhere left to go but forward. Make the call, she said. Teddy picked up the phone and dialed. It rang 3 times. Then a man's voice, low and warm, answered. Dr. Fleming? Jacob Coulson sounded genuinely glad. It's been a minute. It has, Teddy said. Jacob, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know. I'm not asking for anything except information. Ask, Jacob said simply. Do you know anyone who has compiled use of force data on Beaumont County, Tennessee? A pause. Brief, but meaningful. I don't know off the top of my head, Jacob said slowly, but I know people who would know. Give me until morning. Thank you, Teddy said. Don't thank me yet. Another pause. How's the cut healing? Teddy almost smiled. You saw the video. The whole country saw the video, Jacob said quietly. I'll call you at 7. Teddy hung up. He set the phone down on the table and looked at Chelsea. You built a career fighting this, he said. Let me fight beside you. Chelsea reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. The phone rang at exactly 7 Towand a.m. Teddy was already awake. He had slept fitfully, the way he always did before a big surgery. Not from fear, but from the particular alertness of a mind that knows something important is coming and refuses to fully stand down. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee when Jacob Coulson called, right on time, right to the minute. Chelsea came downstairs 2 minutes later, hair pulled back, already dressed. She took one look at Teddy's face and sat down across from him without a word. Teddy had his phone on speaker between them. I made 4 calls last night, Jacob said. His voice was crisp and focused, reporter's mode, all business. There's a research center at a university in Nashville. They've been running a national law enforcement study for 4 years. Use of force data, traffic stop demographics, complaint resolution rates. They've been building the database quietly because they didn't want political interference before the data was solid. A brief pause. I talked to the lead researcher this morning. Her name is Dr. Anita Reeves. I told her what I had. She pulled Beaumont County before we hung up. Teddy leaned forward slightly. And? She's sending the full analysis to your wife's email in the next 30 minutes, Jacob said. But she told me the headline right away. Another pause, longer this time, waited. Beaumont County's physical use of force incidents over the past 5 years are disproportionately concentrated in 3 zip codes. All 3 are historically black neighborhoods. All 3 are on that rezoning map your partner identified. Chelsea's pen was already moving across her legal pad. Adamson's numbers, specifically, Jacob continued, account for 34% of all physical force used in Sycamore Heights over a 5-year period. 1 officer, 1 neighborhood, 5 years. His voice hardened slightly. Dr. Reeves said, and I'm quoting her directly here, that the statistical probability of that concentration occurring naturally, without deliberate deployment, is essentially 0. The kitchen was very quiet. Teddy looked at Chelsea. She was writing steadily, not looking up, but the set of her jaw told him everything. This was the piece they had been missing. Not just Reverend Mosby's 23 years of individual testimonies, as powerful as those were, but numbers. Hard, peer-review quality numbers that no amount of departmental spin could dissolve. "Jacob," Chelsea said, looking up from her pad. "How fast can you turn a full investigation?" "I've been working on Beaumont County since 6 o'clock last night," he said simply. "I have the rezoning documents, the campaign finance records, the council members' property interests, and Dr. Reeves's analysis. I have Reverend Mosby's notarized files, which your husband's partner was kind enough to provide summary documentation on." A pause. "I just need one more thing." "What's that?" Teddy asked. "A photograph," Jacob said. "Of you, Teddy. Your face. The cut. Doctor." Reeves's email arrived at 7:28 a.m. 52 pages of data, with charts, tables, and a 12-page narrative analysis. Chelsea read every word. Ricky, who had driven back from Memphis the previous evening after Chelsea's call, sat beside her going through the appendices while she worked through the main report. The numbers were devastating in their clarity. Sycamore Heights. Zippy code by zippy code. Stop by stop. Incident by incident. The data didn't editorialize. It didn't need to. It simply showed, in clean columns and precise percentages, that one neighborhood had absorbed a wildly disproportionate share of physical force from one department over 5 years, and that the neighborhood in question happened to sit directly in the path of a profitable development deal. Ricky forwarded the full report to Jemima Clark without being asked. His message to her was 4 words: "This is your spine." Jemima called back in 11 minutes. Combined with Reverend Mosby's notarized documentation and the financial connection between Cameron and Greer's LLC, this establishes pattern, motive, and coordinated conduct. Her voice had the focused energy of someone assembling something large and precise. "I can file a federal civil rights complaint that nobody buries." "Not with this behind it." "How long do you need?" Chelsea asked. "I'm filing Monday morning," Jemima said. 67 pages. Every name. Jacob Coulson's investigation published Saturday evening. It ran on the front page of the national edition. The headline was plain and direct, the way the best journalism always is. The data was laid out clearly. The financial connections were documented. The names, Adamson, Cameron, Brixton, Lyle, Greer, were printed in full. And beside a property value chart for Sycamore Heights, running the full width of the page, was a photograph of Teddy Fleming in his navy church jacket with the gold buttons. His face was turned slightly toward the light. The faint remnant of the cut above his cheekbone was still visible, like a punctuation mark on everything the article was saying. Chelsea read the piece at the kitchen table at 9 o'clock that night. She read it all the way through once without stopping. Then she closed the laptop and sat with her hands flat on the table in the quiet house. Her phone buzzed. Jemima Clark. "I'm filing Monday morning." 67 pages. Every name. Monday morning arrived sharp and clear. Jemima Clark walked into the U.S. District Court Clerk's office in Memphis at 9:08 a.m. in a charcoal gray suit and heels that clicked against the marble floor like a countdown. She carried a leather litigation bag over one shoulder and a 67-page federal civil rights complaint under her arm. She set it on the counter, identified herself, and filed it with the calm efficiency of a woman who had done this 11 times before, and intended to do it many more. The case was docketed by 9:23 a.m. By 10:02 a.m., Jemima had sent certified copies to 3 separate federal offices. By 10:30, she had emailed the full filing to Jacob Coulson's desk, as agreed. By 11, it was public record. Chelsea read the filing at the kitchen table in Sycamore Heights, a fresh cup of coffee at her elbow, and Ricky sitting across from her. They had both read the draft over the weekend, but reading the final version, stamped, docketed, officially entered into the federal record, felt different. It felt like a door that had been kicked open and could not be closed again. The complaint named 3 defendants: Stephen Adamson, individually and in his official capacity. Belinda Cameron, individually and in her official capacity. And Beaumont County itself, as the governing body whose policies, practices, and deliberate inaction had enabled both. The plaintiff was Dr. Teddy Fleming. The filing laid everything out in 67 pages of precise, documented, numbered paragraphs. Adamson's 11 documented incidents from Reverend Mosby's notarized files. Dr. Reeves's statistical analysis showing the disproportionate concentration of force in Sycamore Heights. The financial connections between Cameron's department and Thomas Greer's LLC. The rezoning timeline mapped against the escalation of use-of-force incidents in the 3 target ZIP codes. And the full documented sequence of Sunday evening, the stop, the slam, the badge, and Adamson's response, supported by Darius's unedited video footage, entered into evidence as Exhibit A. It was, Jemima had said over the phone Sunday night, airtight. The reaction was immediate and visible. By noon on Monday, Harold Brixton, Vera Lyle, and Thomas Greer, the 3 city council members named in both the filing and Jacob's national investigation, had each retained private legal counsel. Brixton's attorney released a statement by early afternoon calling the allegations baseless and politically motivated. Lyle's office said nothing at all, which said everything. Greer did not return calls. The silence from the 3 of them was its own kind of answer. Teddy watched the news from the living room couch beside his mother, his phone buzzing steadily with messages he wasn't reading. His mother had her hand on his arm. She had barely let go of him since Sunday. He understood. He let her hold on. At 2:15 p.m., Chelsea's personal cell phone rang. The number had a Washington, D.C. area code she didn't recognize. She answered it carefully. The voice on the other end identified itself as belonging to a senior official at the Department of Justice. The call was brief and to the point. The DOJ had been monitoring the situation in Beaumont County. The filing, combined with the national coverage and the senator's formal letter requesting a departmental review, had moved the matter to a level of attention that required direct response. The hold on Chelsea's preliminary inquiry was being lifted, effective immediately. She was restored to full active duty status. Chelsea listened without speaking until the call ended. Then she sat with the phone in her hand for a long moment. She called Ricky. "It's lifted," she said. "I know," he said. "Danson just called me. He's asking you to come in." She drove to the Memphis field office at 4 in the afternoon. Danson met her in the hallway outside his office rather than behind his desk, which she noticed. He held out her full credentials, the leather case, the gold badge, the photo ID, with both hands, like he understood the weight of what he was returning. "The letter of counseling from the Hamilton case has been formally reviewed," he said. "It's been removed from your file. No relevance to any finding of misconduct. It's gone." Chelsea took her credentials. She looked at them for one moment. Then she slid them into the inner pocket of her blazer, right where they belonged. Danson said quietly, "I should have held the line." Chelsea looked at him. There were things she could have said. There were several true things she could have said that would have landed exactly as hard as they deserved to. She chose none of them. "Yes," she said simply. "You should have." She turned and walked back down the hallway toward the elevator, her credentials against her chest, her steps steady and even on the hard floor. Tuesday morning came in gray and still. Stephen Adamson was in his kitchen at 7:15 a.m., still in a white undershirt, pouring his first cup of coffee, when he heard the knock at his front door. It wasn't the casual knock of a neighbor or a delivery driver. It was the kind of knock that carries authority in its rhythm. 3 sharp, deliberate strikes that leave no room for pretending you didn't hear them. He opened the door. 4 federal agents stood on his porch. Plain clothes, badges visible, expressions completely neutral. The agent in front, tall, measured, unhurried, identified herself by name and division and handed Adamson a sealed document with both hands. Federal civil rights violation charges. His name, printed clearly on the first line. Adamson stared at the document, then at the agents, then back at the document. His coffee cup was still in his hand. He stood in the doorway of his own house in his undershirt and said nothing for a long time because there was nothing useful left to say. "You'll want to contact an attorney," the lead agent said. "Today." They left him standing in the open doorway with the papers in his hand and the morning air coming in cold around him. The Beaumont County Sheriff's Department released a statement at 9 a.m. It was 4 sentences long. It expressed confidence in the justice system. It stated that the department was cooperating fully with all relevant authorities. It did not mention Stephen Adamson's name. It did not express support for him in any form. Adamson read the statement on his phone from his kitchen table, still in his undershirt. The federal documents spread out beside his untouched coffee cup. That was the moment he understood that the machine that had protected him for 6 years had made a business decision. He was the cost of doing business. He was being cut loose cleanly and without ceremony, the way you remove a damaged part so the rest of the engine keeps running. He picked up his phone and called a private attorney. Belinda Cameron had seen it coming for 72 hours. She had watched the filing go public Monday morning with the careful attention of a woman reading her own medical results, searching for the margin, the escape clause, the technical error that might create distance between herself and the inevitable. She found none. Jemima Clark had been too thorough. Jacob Coulson had been too precise, and Dr. Reeves's statistical analysis had removed every last hiding place that departmental language might have offered. By Monday evening, Cameron had already made a phone call to a federal prosecutor she knew professionally. A quiet, exploratory call. The kind of call that begins with hypothetically speaking and ends with a clear understanding of what cooperation might be worth. By Tuesday afternoon, she was cooperating formally, which meant she was confirming everything. The pattern of targeted enforcement in Sycamore Heights, the deliberate concentration of Adamson's deployments in the 3 rezoning zip codes, the understanding, never written down, never stated plainly, but understood the way certain things are understood between people who have worked together long enough, that keeping those neighborhoods destabilized served a financial purpose that benefited people above her pay grade. She signed her resignation letter Wednesday morning. It was 3 sentences long. It said nothing. The news hit the 3 city council members like a controlled demolition. Harold Brixton, Vera Lyle, and Thomas Greer watched their names travel through the national news cycle for the 3rd consecutive day, first in Jacob's investigation, then in the federal filing, and now in the coverage of Cameron's cooperation and resignation. Each new wave brought their financial connections closer to the surface. Greer's LLC, the donations, the rezoning timeline. By Wednesday afternoon, all 3 had announced separately, and within hours of each other, that they would not be seeking re-election. By Thursday morning, the commercial rezoning proposal for Sycamore Heights, Beaumont's other 2 historically black ZP codes, and everything connected to the development deal had been formally withdrawn from the city council agenda. 40 years of a neighborhood being slowly squeezed. 23 years of complaints filed and buried. 6 years of Stephen Adamson deployed like a weapon against people who had done nothing except live on land someone else wanted. And now, in the space of 1 week, all of it was being dragged into the light. In her living room, Reverend Arlene Mosby watched the evening news with her hands folded in her lap. The anchor was reading the names: Adamson, Cameron, Brixton, Lyle, Greer. One by one, like a list being checked off. Reverend Mosby watched without expression. When the segment ended, she reached over and turned the television off. She sat in the quiet for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes and folded her hands and bowed her head. Not in defeat, in gratitude. Teddy called Chelsea at her office just before 5. "It's over?" he asked. She leaned back in her chair and looked out the window at the Memphis skyline going amber in the late afternoon light. "The legal part," she said, "is just beginning. Adamson's case alone will take months. Cameron's cooperation means more depositions, more filings, more time." She paused. "But the part where they get to pretend none of this happened?" She picked up her credentials from the desk and turned them over once in her hand. "That part is over." Teddy was quiet for a moment. Then, "Come home for dinner. I'll be there by 7, she said. The oak trees on Sycamore Avenue had started turning. Just at the edges, the first faint traces of amber and gold working their way in from the tips of the leaves, the way fall always announced itself in Tennessee. Slow and quiet at first, then all at once. Teddy had always loved that about this street. The way the seasons changed here felt personal somehow, like the neighborhood was marking time alongside the people who lived in it. He turned the black sedan onto Sycamore Avenue at 10:30 on a Saturday morning and drove slowly, both hands on the wheel, the way he always did. Chelsea sat in the passenger seat, with her legs crossed and her hands folded in her lap. The same seat, the same suit, cream pinstripe, freshly pressed. The same street. 6 weeks later, and everything was different, and the street looked exactly the same. And somehow, both of those things were true at once. Teddy parked in front of his mother's house and turned off the engine. Neither of them moved for a moment. "Ready?" Chelsea said. He looked at her. At the woman who had stepped out of a car on this street 6 weeks ago with a gold badge in her hand, and not one single tremor in her voice. At the woman who had fought the machine with both hands, been knocked back by the machine with both hands, and had gotten back up and dismantled it piece by piece, with nothing but documentation, determination, and the absolute refusal to be made invisible. "Yeah," he said. "I'm ready." He was wearing his church jacket, the navy one, the gold buttons catching the morning light. The shoulder seam had been repaired so cleanly, you had to look hard to find where it had torn. Reverend Mosby was on her porch. She saw them the moment they stepped out of the car, and she stood up from her chair, slowly, with the careful dignity of a woman who had earned every one of her 71 years, and she came down her porch steps, one at a time, holding the railing, crossing the street toward them. But she wasn't alone. By the time Teddy came around the front of the car, there were people on the sidewalk. Not a crowd exactly, not yet, but people emerging from houses and driveways and porches the way they had emerged 6 weeks ago, except this time there was no fear pulling them out. This time it was something else entirely. 12 people, then 20, then close to 40. Faces Teddy had known his whole life. Faces he recognized from Reverend Mosby's files, the woman from 2 blocks over whose son had been stopped 3 times in 4 months, the family whose complaint had been signed off and buried by Cameron's signature, the neighbors who had stood on their porches 6 weeks ago and watched and not known whether watching was all they were ever going to be able to do. Justin Edwards was there. 67 years old, standing straight with a cane he hadn't needed before Adamson broke his wrist on a Tuesday morning when he was doing nothing except walking his dog. He stood near the back of the group, and when Teddy's eyes found him, Justin gave one slow, deliberate nod. Teddy nodded back. Nobody made a speech. Nobody had organized this. It had simply happened the way things happen in neighborhoods where people have lived alongside each other long enough to move together without being told to. Reverend Mosby came to Teddy and took both of his hands in hers. She looked up at his face, at the cheekbone that had fully healed, leaving nothing behind, and she held his hands for a long moment without speaking. Then she said, "I told you this street has seen worse." Her voice was quiet and certain, the voice of a woman who had been keeping faith with this block for longer than most people could remember. "I also told you it always finds its way back." Teddy looked at her. His throat was tight. He didn't try to speak. Chelsea stood beside him on the sidewalk where he had grown up, in front of the house where his mother still lived, on the street that someone had tried to hollow out from the inside. The morning light came through the turning oak trees in long gold bars. A child somewhere down the block was laughing at something. She was not calculating the next move. She was not managing a case or building a strategy or holding herself together against the weight of something pressing down. She was just standing here, beside her husband, on solid ground. Teddy put his arm around her shoulder. His mother appeared at the front window, one hand pressed flat against the glass, watching her son standing tall on the street where she had raised him. Down the block, on the porch steps where it had all started, Darius sat in the morning sun with his hoodie pushed up to his elbows. His phone was in his pocket. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.